Hello and welcome to the Alpha Demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software, and I am pleased to be joined by our presenter today, Sarah Mitchell, our Director of Customer Success and Head of Documentation. Today, there's going to be a test, or probably more than one, and that is because today's topic is on testing. So if you have any questions, even if they're not about testing, but they're just about Alpha Anywhere, you could always type those questions into the chat log or the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel, and we will be happy to answer them. You can also reach us outside of the webinar by sending us an email to guides, GUIDES, @alphasoftware.com. Hello, Sarah. How's it going?
Going.
Excellent. I love this picture today. It's just really calming fields. It's stunning. Very nice.
Yeah. Maybe too soothing.
Maybe too soothing. All right. It'll be a test. So.
A test, yes. All right. Yeah. Thanks for joining us today, everyone. I do want to throw out there too, if you post on forum.alphasoftware.com, we're monitoring questions there as well. So feel free to ask questions on the forums. We'll try to chime in when we think it needs some help from our side. But I do believe a lot of people on the forum are very knowledgeable, and we do encourage community there.
It is. We don't bring that up very often, but we do now monitor forum. Is it forum.alphasoftware.com? Is it the?
I think it's forum.alphasoftware.com. Yeah. In fact, you could go get that link for me and for us and paste in the chat window. For
I would be happy to. I'll do that right now.
So, as a reminder, everyone, DevCon is coming. If you haven't signed up yet, I hope you sign up soon. It's October 18th to 22nd this year, and it's all remote, and the sessions are recorded. So if you can't, even if you can't make it, you will have access to the content. And we try to get those recordings up as quickly as possible during DevCon. So register now if you haven't, and if you've already registered, I am looking forward to seeing you there.
You are. We were just going through the agenda this morning, and there'll be some more
yes,
stuff coming up soon, including some stuff on machine learning. Maybe I shouldn't be spoiling.
No spoilers.
Oh man, there's some cool stuff coming up. I'm just saying.
Yeah, we got a lot of exciting content coming on that. But I also wanted to just do some housekeeping. We have a deprecation announcement. WCF and SOAP services are no longer supported in Alpha Anywhere, effective at the beginning of this month. And they will be permanently removed sometime after January 1st, 2023 from the product. If you are using a SOAP service or a WCF service in your application, we strongly encourage you to contact your vendor and move to a RESTful service. Deprecating this isn't new. Microsoft deprecated SOAP a while ago, and most vendors have deprecated it. Same with Windows Communication Foundation. So we're just finally making that decision ourselves, which the rest of industry has done. But yeah, definitely look into that if you're using it. If you're not, it doesn't affect you. So don't need to worry about it.
Excellent.
And as Dave mentioned today, we're going to be talking about testing, validating your application is ready to ship. And really, this is just going to be an overview of all the different ways that you can test your apps with Alpha Anywhere. And I wanted to just, remind everyone that these tools are available to you. We saw a little bit of testing last week at Dion's presentation by publishing and testing in the local development server. But there's so many other ways that you can test your application, and other options available to you as well if you're going the mobile route. So the big question is, why should you test your application? Why should you test anything that you build? Well, to make sure it works, to make sure it does what you think it should be doing, and also make sure that it looks good on the target platform that you plan to deploy on.
I have a question for you, Sarah, right away.
Already.
Are you moving from slide to slide? And if so, you might want to.
Oh no, I'm not. Screen. Sorry.
Oh, you're not. Okay.
Oh no. Oh no. Oh. We have to start the whole presentation over again.
Well, it's not that long into it, so I'm sure it won't be that bad.
Well, you missed my cat.
Oh, all right. Hang on. Let's go back to Alpha DevCon. Clearly a cat.
Register for DevCon.
Spoilers about machine learning.
SOAP and WCF services.
I did. Wow, that's really wow. A little dark. Okay.
It
Yeah.
is. I really do like to use this slide though.
So,
So you
oh,
missed my cat, you missed the deprecation announcement, and you missed the intro to testing.
wow.
Yeah. But here, really, why should you test? These are the, for the reasons. There are other reasons. These things I think are the good ones. Make sure it works. Make sure it looks the way you think you want it to look on the target platform. Testing in the emulator on the UX preview is fine, but those preview sizes aren't the same as maybe your target devices that you're going to. So being able to test on those target devices will give you a really good idea of how things look. Maybe you have more space than you thought you did or less. And then also, through experimentation and discovery, testing things can lead to either ideas of doing something or, give you a way to play with something. Maybe you're not planning to deploy something, but you'd like to build it and try it out. Some of these testing options would give you that opportunity. So within the Alpha Anywhere platform itself, the tools that you have available to you are wide and varied. We have the working and live preview. We have something called Live Test, which is probably one of the newest things we've introduced in recent years. Remote Test. We have the Alpha Shell and Alpha Launch products. And then, of course, our favorite, publishing to a server and trying it out in a test environment. So I just want to talk about each one of these. I'll go back one slide. I just want to talk briefly about the pros and cons of each one of these to give you an idea of when it may be appropriate to use them or when maybe you shouldn't be using them, when maybe one of these other options is the better choice to go with. And so we're just going to start with the working preview. Working preview is an emulated environment. It can be run side by side with the UX builder. So you can actually detach it and put it on another screen and keep it open and running while you're making changes. And it has several debugging tools within it. It has the Basic Debugger, it has the Chrome Debugger, and those are two excellent tools to definitely learn and leverage when you're developing to both, figure out where things are going wrong in your scripts, as well as being able to do things with on the Chrome Debugger side, just trying to figure out what class name is that, or where is this extra space coming from. You can use that to dig into the design of your screens and really dig down into the meat of what Alpha Anywhere is producing and solve some of those problems. Some of the limitations, though, you cannot test security. So if you have an app that has a login enabled and you need to log in first before you can do anything, you can't use Working Preview for that. Working Preview also doesn't have any XBasic server objects. So the context object, it has security, it has request and response, and you may need those objects to do things like get the currently logged in user or log in a user, or maybe you want to return some information from the server to the client through the request through the response object. You don't have that in Working Preview. And also, because Working Preview is an emulated environment, it's not your target environment. It's definitely not a web browser. So anything that comes with those types of environments isn't going to be available to you. And also, if you've got an app that's made with more than one component, you are really limited in only testing a portion of your app. And because it's not running in a mobile app, running on a mobile device as like a native mobile app, you have no access to test any of the Cordova plugins. Live Preview is similar to Working Preview. It is also an emulated environment, but it has a few more things for you. It is running the development server on the back end, so you have access to those server objects. It can also emulate the security groups, so not logged in as a user, but maybe viewing the app as an administrator or like an marketing role, depending on what you've defined in your security roles. You can emulate that in Live Preview. And it also has, the XBasic debugger and the Chrome debugger. It cannot be detached, which is really where between Live and Working Preview, that's really the big thing between the two. Working Preview is slightly faster to run, but I don't think the speed difference is significant enough that anybody's really going to notice while they're testing their apps. So if you want that detached experience where you can just like make some changes, refresh, make some changes, refresh, working preview is a good way to go. But if you're not looking to have that, I strongly recommend using live preview instead, because it's going to put you closer to the environment that you're going to deploy to. Of course, as with all of these tools, there are limitations for all of them. Live preview, again, is an emulated environment, so it's not your target environment. There are going to be things that aren't in it. It is, again, testing a portion of your app because it's run within the UX builder itself. So if your app is more than one component, you may not be able to test that. And then also because it's not running on a native mobile device, you can't test any of the Cordova plugins or anything that would require that. So these next set of features are remote test and live test, unless I forgot to put a live test slide in. But these are starting to get away from an emulated environment and more in an area where you are actually testing on potentially the target platform. So in the case of web applications, doing a remote test, you can run that component in a temporary web page in the browser. It emulates security groups, so you still are missing that login piece, but you can, with a remote test, run that page on other devices on the network. So if you are working on the same network as a coworker or your boss and you want to show them something, you could run a remote test to pull it up on their end, and they can, look at it, give you some feedback, whatever it is that you want to show them, and just, quickly look at that. It has some limitations as well. Again, because it's a remote test is really focused on a component, you're still testing a portion of your app. It's not deployed on a mobile device, so you don't have access to plugins. And the other limitation too is that any devices you want to run that on have to be on the same network. So that's going to limit to the access to who can look at your app and who can try it out. Live test is a step above remote test. So live test is literally publishing your application to the development server, which is included in Alpha Anywhere. And while as a community edition user, you cannot publish to the development server like deliberately, you can run a live test on the development server. And what this gives you is it gives you access to test the security framework. You get to test your entire app. Live test requires that you publish an A5W page, which all components need to be embedded in an A5W page. At least one of them does somewhere, so that you can open that up in a browser. So live test gives you a way to test your entire app. With the security framework, you have access to the browser's JavaScript debugger in that situation. You do also in the remote test if you're in the browser. And also because it's running in a browser, you've escaped the emulated environment. So now you're getting closer to the environment you may be deploying to. If you're building a web application, live test really is that first opportunity to see, like, is this going to run how I think it should, and try that out in your target platform. Again, because it's in a browser, you do not have access to Cordova features. You do have access to something called the Remote X Basic Debugger, which we can take a look at how you turn that on. So if you need to debug some X Basic, that's available there. But beyond that, this is really the key limitation. Also with live test, if you can show that to other people, you can give them that URL of where it's being hosted. They will need to be on the same network as the machine that's running it though. So that's also a limitation there. Pivoting a bit towards the mobile side of testing things. So live test is great for web and even mobile web. If you want to test web apps that will be targeted for the mobile device, and progressive web apps are another good example there that could run there. But if at the end of the day you're going to be building an iOS or Android application that's going to be shipped from the App Store or distributed privately through some internal app marketplace that you have, Alpha Shell is an app that you can leverage to start testing your parts of your application in the actual mobile environment that you want to run it in. Alpha Shell itself is a free app you can download from the App Store for iOS or Google Play for Android. Just search for Alpha Shell and install it. It's a installed app. Your components will load in it and run as if you'd built a native application and put it on the device. You do have to have an application server to do this. And if your app uses a database, that database needs to be reachable by the app server. And the reason I'm calling this out is because if you are using Alpha Cloud doesn't host database for you, so you do need to have a solution for that Alpha Cloud can connect to. So keep these pieces in mind. Alpha Shell runs
Although
components.
sorry to interrupt, but Alpha Cloud does come with a test database that you can use. So if you're
It
doing
does come with a test database you can
but
use. The
it's not
big
backed up.
caveat there is it's a test database, not a production database.
Mhm.
And I imagine some people already have a database that they want to use or have some data they want to connect with. So if you already have that, just bear in mind that you need to be able to reach that from Alpha Cloud. And we have lots of information
So
on how
will
to do
this
that.
work with the development server? It probably won't, would it? Or would it work with the development server if you had the full edition of Alpha Anywhere, just not the
The development server is an app server.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you could get it working with that. There's some caveats with that. It's not going to be very easy with Community Edition, I think is what I'm trying to get at with that one.
Right. Yep.
So with Alpha Shell, though, there are limitations here as well. You are only testing a portion of your app. It doesn't support web themes. So the way Alpha Shell works is you register a component, a UX component, usually, almost never a good component because they're not supported on mobile. And what it does is it loads that component in the UI. It requires an internet connection. It doesn't work offline. It doesn't let you do things like, include your own custom web themes. There's no access to the Basic Debugger, and it's also limited to the plugins that are included with Alpha Shell when we built and released that app. So if your application uses other plugins that aren't included in Alpha Shell, you will be unable to test those in this case. But from a testing standpoint of getting, building your component and just really quickly checking is the core functionality there, ignoring the visual pieces, Alpha Shell is a very good option for you. And we did a webinar on this, I want to say last year, but it might have been 2 years ago at this time, or at this point. And we haven't updated the app since that webinar, so all the information is still relevant. But if you want to know more about that, we can get you can go check our YouTube channel for that. Dave, if you can go dig that link up, maybe.
I would be happy
Post it
to.
in the chat, that would be helpful. In addition to Alpha Shell, we also have Alpha Launch, which we've talked about more in recent history, and I think we bring it up periodically. It also is a mobile app you can download for free from the iOS, the App Store for iOS and Google Play for Android. It's a native app. You can use it to test your entire application. It does require an app server and that your database can be reached from the app server. But with Alpha Launch, what you can do is basically just use it as your deployment solution. You build your app in Alpha Anywhere, and you get to the point that you want to ship it. You can package that all up as an Alpha Launch app, register your application server with Alpha Launch to install it, and then people can download that and run it, and you're good to go. Similar to the Alpha Shell app, you only have access to the Cordova plugins included in Alpha Launch. Just as a side note, if you use Alpha Launch and there's a plugin that you would like to see added that you think would be really, really useful to be there, send us an email at guides@alphasoftware.com about that plugin, and we may consider adding it. So it's under, we are continuing to develop Alpha Launch and improve it, and we want to know that kind of information that might make your life easier. So keep that in mind. We do also offer custom builds of Alpha Launch if you just want your own, personally branded version for your apps that includes all your own plugins and that kind of stuff. We offer that too as a service. We'll publish it for you and get that up in the stores. Also, no Basic Debugger for Alpha Launch either. And just as a side note, once you've got apps in a device, in a mobile device running in a native app, either published as a native app or running in Alpha Launch, you lose the JavaScript debugger as well. There are ways to connect tools like Android Studio to devices to debug what's going on, but that starts to get into a really complicated area. So as much testing as you can do up front with live and working preview, live test, or remote test before you get to the point where you're putting things on Alpha Launch or in Alpha Shell for testing purposes. Getting those up front, especially on the client side and XBasic backend, you'll do yourself a huge benefit to make sure that stuff's all running really good and that you've eliminated warnings and errors from your code before you try to take it to the next step or go as far as publishing, which is the last option. And this is like the most comprehensive option. You publish your app to a testing framework that is identical to your final target environment. This is like building your app with Ionic App Flow and then publishing it through, well, not publishing it, but making it available through something like TestFlight or taking those APK files and distributing them to some people to test on their Android devices. Publishing is running in the target environment. This eliminates all guesswork as to whether or not you're going to run into issues because you're in that environment. It is testing your whole app. It is the security framework. And in the target environment, you have access to all those debugging tools. So in the case of a web application, it's the browser debugging tools. And in the case of a like an Android Studio built app using Cordova CLI, it's the Android Studio tools. And publishing and deploying into a test environment, this one does require the most things. You need to have an application server to host your application. You need to have your database access all worked out for that. And you may also need third-party tools or accounts, such as an Ionic AppFlow account or an Apple developer account, if that's your target environment.
And when you say requires app server, that also you could substitute Alpha Cloud for that, right? Since it runs the app
Alpha
server.
Cloud would be the server, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So
Sometimes
the app
people
server
think,
is
oh, I
having
have a cloud
your Alpha
account.
Cloud account set up.
Do I need to get a server? And it's like, no, the server is included in cloud. It's just one of these questions we do tend to get.
Okay. Yeah. No, Alpha Cloud is us hosting the server for you, so you don't have to figure out all the hardware and software backends pieces to keep that running.
Great, thanks.
Yep. So that's the end of the presentation, is just talking about those few things. I did want to show you how to do live test turning on the Basic Debugger. Oh, I don't know why I maximized it. So we're just gonna run this community edition nightly build I've got here, and it's opening up in another place. We'll make a new empty workspace. And there we go. Okay. Sorry you missed some of those pieces. So I mentioned with live test, you can have access to the Basic Debugger, and it's this thing called client-side debugging. So if you check that, you can now, it will attach the Basic Debugger while it's running and open it up in the development environment as you're doing stuff. So this is a really powerful tool to have. With the Community Edition, you can live test in 2 locations, on the development server, which is included in Alpha Anywhere, or on Alpha Cloud if you have an Alpha Cloud account. Note that you do not have access anymore to that Basic debugging feature that was there. So this is only available if you're doing a live test on a development server. So I would like to answer questions today. I don't know if there's much I need to show with respect to those options. With Alpha Launch, the publishing options are down here under the More menu, right here. With Alpha Shell, if you're using that, those options for publishing are in here in this menu in the UX Builder. It's down here at the bottom. It's called Alpha Shell QR codes. So that walks you through setting it up, and then that QR code is what you scan to get your component into the application. And then live remote test is right here. It looks exactly like the live test icon, but it says remote. And if you click that and you had things to find in your component, let's add a text box. There it goes. So we do a remote test here. It's going to ask me to start the application server, the development server, basically. And let's save this real quick. Call this text box. There we go. So remote test, you're gonna have two options. These are the same options you see if you do a live preview. Recommend full preview if you've never done it before. Fast preview will just update the component. Full preview will make sure all the resources are pulled into it. But this dialog basically asks you, how do you want to get the information for the live test? If you want to share this with someone on the network, a URL, copying a URL to a clipboard might be sufficient. If you want to test on a mobile device on your network, displaying a QR code that you could scan would be the best way to go about getting that onto your mobile device. You could also send an email if you want to send an email instead. Keep in mind that all of your devices need to be on the same network for that to work. We talked about live preview, full preview here. This is my text box. This is the Chrome debugger you have access to. If you click on that, it brings it up. And now you can use this to investigate parts of your app or, look for in the console for errors. Look at the source, the JavaScript maybe you've created for it, so on and so forth. If you've never used this JavaScript debugger thing, just a side note, we are going to talk about how you can utilize this next week if you've never used it before, and what all these other tabs are. Working preview, I mentioned that you can detach it. It's this detach working preview button at the bottom, and this basically opens it up in another window. You can put this window, on another screen, or you can leave it here. It stays on the foreground. It has a refresh button. You can also turn on something called automatic refresh. Caution against that if your component is large and it takes a minute or two to render, because if automatic refresh is on, every time you change a setting, it will automatically refresh, which could really bog down your environment while you're working with it. So, stick with the manual refresh as you're working on things. This also has the Chrome debugger, and there's like a little info link here too you can use to learn more about it. Please hold. I just did something.
Sure.
There it goes. Okay. I think it's back. Is it back? It's back. It's not back. I closed working preview. I didn't like that very much. So with respect to testing stuff, were there any questions? Do people have any questions about those tools?
There are a few questions. Let me take a look here. One was it had to do with testing sort of a desktop applications. How would you go about doing that if they're running it on an intranet? You just sort of, it actually sounds like it might be a similar or maybe even easier scenario because you can always add pieces to your desktop application and test them there without having to publish per se.
Right. I am not a good person to ask that question at
Okay,
all.
that's fair.
If I'm brutally honest, desktop applications are still a mystery to me.
Hmm.
They are pretty easy to edit and try out. So a testing in the development environment in the Alpha Anywhere IDE is going to give you what you're probably going to have at the end of the day. There may be some network things. Maybe you're connecting to a different database instance,
That's
or
right.
maybe you have access to
There's
files.
a little bit less of, well, it works on my machine kind of going on. I mean,
Yes,
typically,
yeah,
if it
yeah.
does
You're
work in
gonna
the IDE, you're going to be okay when you move to another machine.
Yeah, the environment and the development environment for desktop applications is incredibly close to what your actual deployment environment is,
Hmm.
um, because that's what Alpha Anywhere is. It's a
It's
desktop
a,
app.
yeah, same
It
code
literally,
base, same
like what you
everything.
build with it is what it is. So
Yep.
yeah.
Someone asked here about Alpha Cloud. Someone wanted a link. He says not the sales pitch, so I gave them the actual link without the sales pitch. That's you can find that in the chat window.
What was that?
It's an overview. It's right from the documentation system. It includes an overview of what Alpha Cloud is and all that. So that's actually really worth checking out if you really want to get
Yeah,
hands-on. We've also done some webinars on Alpha Cloud
we've
as
done a few.
well.
Yes,
But if if the kind of person who likes to read and skim, this page will I think help you out here.
this is the comprehensive thing for Alpha Cloud. If you're
Yep.
looking to migrate from an existing Alpha Anywhere server, definitely come here and check out what's here. If you've never used it before and you just want to get your feet wet, we do have a course. Introduction to Alpha Cloud here. This is free. You just need to sign up on learnalphasoftware.com to get access to this. It's a very basic introduction on, how to get your app up into Alpha Cloud and then some monitoring information on that. I'll put that in the chat. Oh, I should probably send it to everyone and not just Dave.
Oh, yeah, good plan. So this
But
again
yeah,
is
definitely check this out.
great non-sales pitch version. I mean, you don't want anyone saying that it's an unbelievable value at $99 a month and you can sign up at
But it's an
alphasoftware.com, for
unbelievable
example.
value at
But it
$99
is,
a month.
but I'm sorry, I had to put that pitch in. It's required by my contract.
Try it out.
We have a few other questions here, which we'll get to. Oh, okay, this is, let's start with this one. And it is not a testing question. This one
Oh,
has to do with,
okay.
sorry, what can we get into non-testing
It's
questions?
okay.
This person has a heavy list. In other words, a list that's got a lot of data that loads, and they've set it up to have a wait message that appears. And then when it's finished loading, the wait message goes away. But they think they put the event that hides that wait message maybe on the wrong action, because sometimes that wait message goes away, but the thing is still loading. So the question is, what is the client-side event that's probably the last one to run when a list control is being loaded up?
I don't know. Probably one of the refresh events.
Well, let's just take a look at the,
Let's go look at a list.
yeah.
Or even a UX. I mean, everything that the list does go through an Ajax callback. So
Mhm.
you could potentially use something like after Ajax callback to clean that up,
Right.
either on the server side or probably the client side after Ajax callback complete. The list itself has a bunch of
Is there an
events.
on render complete? That's another
There is a
question.
non-render complete in the client side events.
So that's
The
okay.
question is whether or not it is triggered
Is it truly the last thing? Yeah,
last.
I imagine
And
it will
the other
be.
question on that too is it triggered only once or does it get triggered a few times during that process? So
Right, like if you hit refresh or something like that, or yeah.
yeah, so if you're, I don't really have a good answer for this, and I feel like I probably know who asked this question because I saw it come in earlier this week in support.
Okay.
But if you have a theory about something that might be, let's look at populate. So there is a populate, fires after the list has been
There's
populated.
also an on list ready, although is that after it's, I'm presumably ready to.
I think this only happens
Fires
once.
after the list has been populated. I see.
Yeah. So I think unpopulate might be a good candidate. The UX on render complete might be a good candidate. To really narrow that down, something I do, I'll do like a console.log in the event itself. So we'll do that, and let's base this on some SQL, not arguments. Let's say we make our demo Northwind connection string and delete all the data that was in there. So we'll use that guy. Let's grab everything from customers and let's just get like
All right.
country, company name, and customer ID from that.
Mhm.
And then head over to the layout just so that it has something to render. Otherwise it won't trigger that event. And while we're at it, let's go to the server or client side event, render complete. On render complete. And I see somebody else is voting for one of the list events after render complete. Let's look at that one as well. Go. All right. So if we open up live preview and we open up the Chrome debugger, all that information will be in there. We do
Makes
try our
sense.
best to try to describe when these things fire, but sometimes it's a bit, it's difficult to try to like pin them down specifically. So we see that after render complete was fired before on populate was fired.
Mm-hmm.
And then on render complete is the last one. So after render complete, maybe if this is firing before the list is populated, then, or before the population is complete, then maybe that's not correct. This could also just be a red herring. It may be that these are fired at the same time, but in sequence. So,
Mm-hmm.
but that's when we can kind of get into it.
Well, you could move your code down to on populate or even on render complete and see whether or
Yeah.
not it works. And if it
Yep.
doesn't work, then just send us an email and we'll get the programmers to tell us exactly which one. Yeah.
Well, and I think, to make this even more complete, this list should probably have something to trigger a repopulate of what's in it. So let's add
Okay.
search part. I'm literally telling you guys how I figured this stuff out.
Fantastic.
Let's create a search part. Let's create controls on the UX for the list search part. Let's create controls for all unmapped controls. Click OK. Let's put it after the selected control here. And wrap all the controls in a container, accept all those defaults. There we go. So here's our search stuff. I probably shouldn't have put it below. I should put it above because that's going to be where you're going to look first, right? So we go back into live preview and open up that Chrome debugger again.
Mhm.
And I am going to make this smaller so we can kind of keep this on screen. Let's put it right here so you can see this. So here's our list. And so let's see, we wanted to search for country Germany. And let's pretend like I was smart and did I included a search button, but I didn't. Is it list search? Now let's go back and add it. I don't remember. We
That's too
didn't
much
add the
cheating.
search buttons, and that's a defined control. So we come down here and we find list search part button, submit and clear search for list 1. There we
Great.
go. And let's just remove that real quick and make these all 30%. All right, now we can submit our search. I think there was a checkbox to add those buttons and I just neglected to grab it. So we were looking for Germany,
Mhm.
and we click search, and we see that only on populate fired. So there was no after render complete event for that list. So on populate, I feel is
Unpopulate
probably
is
going
the
to be the
winner.
best bet.
Yep. Yep.
Again, learning how to use the Chrome debugger can really help you figure things out while you're building your apps. So I'm hoping that's helpful for whoever asked that question.
So this is an interesting one that someone's pointed out here. Yes, no, that does look very helpful. Thank you. Someone said, look, instead of manually creating the wait message in the client server side events, if you go into the properties on the left-hand menu below controls, you can select a checkbox that says show wait message on Ajax callback. And it will just display a message on all the callbacks. Oh, interesting. So is that a property for the
Are we talking about a property in the UX properties or a
list?
property in the
I think it
list?
might be on the I think it might be on the list level.
Let's go check the list properties. Let's search for, is it Ajax?
Yeah.
Wait. Nope.
Maybe it isn't then. Maybe it is in list
I
properties
think
then.
it must be in the UX. There it is. Show await
There we
match.
go.
Let's turn that on and see what happens. And let's clear out that search and go look at where it's at. It's called wait messages on Ajax callbacks. Okay. So, hey,
Well,
look at
look at
that.
that.
So if the person who is looking for this solution is doing Ajax callbacks, that might be a solution for you to look at. Oh, and they are eternally grateful to whoever suggested that. So you have saved someone's life today. Thank you so much. I forgot this existed too. So
You know what? It's like Lee Vasic said in our last week's webinar. He said, you really should just look for a builder first because Alpha may do it automatically, and he was right.
yes, there are things we do automatically. So keep in mind that's going to display on every single Ajax callback.
Right.
Not digging into this too much. So
But that may be fine for
that
a
might
lot
be
of
fine.
cases. Yeah.
And you can customize that here. You can change the text. You can use something called a CSS3 animation, which will, I think, instead of displaying that little animated GIF thing, if you turn this on, it does a CSS animation of the message. So let's look at that real quick. Let's look for everybody that has the letter P in their name.
Ooh, okay, that's cool. Instead of just being wait, it's one of those spinners. I love it.
Yeah. Okay.
Neat.
Yep. Can you change that CSS animation? I don't know. I don't know how you would customize that.
Yeah.
So you might have to just use one we have in there, but that's available too if you'd prefer that.
Looks pretty good though. All right, so I have two other questions. One is about something that you posted on the message board in 2015.
I don't remember what I said.
Oh, you don't. You're already saying you don't remember, but you may very well remember it. It has to do. I'm actually going to find it.
Oh, is this how do I use Visual Studio Debugger?
That's the one.
You can't.
Is that true?
Preview, you can't.
Yeah. Okay.
No. So the Visual Studio Debugger was something you could utilize when we offered Internet Explorer as a emulator for previewing your application, but we've
Right.
removed that. All of these previews just use Chrome, so you have to use the Chrome debugger for it.
Okay. All right. Well, that's that then. And then the other question had to do with the difference between session and state variables. First of all, what are they? And if they wanted to use state variables instead of session variables when a component is initialized, how would they go about doing it?
Okay, so session variables are created on the server. They live on
Mhm.
XBasic. They are not available on the client unless you explicitly publish them, which we
Mhm.
generally do not recommend because the whole idea behind having a session variable is that you've got data or some kind of information for the current session, which usually represents a person or an instance of your app running in a browser that you want to track, but you do not want to make available on the client.
Right.
So like the
And
tenant
the
ID
environment.
would be something you might want to store in a session variable, but probably shouldn't make available on the client side because once you've put it in the client, you've now given your users access to that information and they could potentially use it. Um, State information is with the component. You can store information in state variables as things happen. State variables are available on the server side and the client side, and I think they are a very good tool to leverage and use if you've got something you want to keep track of, like trying to think of an example. Maybe you want to track what phase they are going through, like a 3 or 4 page genie wizard step thing. State
Okay.
variables are a great place to put that information, or really anything that you want to store and have available in your server and client side events on demand. The state variables, let's go look at here, insert method. Let's look for state info. It's called state info. So we have set state info, get state info.
Hmm.
These are just variables you can create, put information in, and use them anywhere. Uh, you could use them to store some information that you want to have available on the server when an AJAX callback is made. So maybe people have filled out a few fields and you want to put all the information in state variables so on the server side callback is made, it can look at that and be like, aha, this is what I need to search for. That's one way you could use it.
Now, you've mentioned they're available both on the client side and on the server side.
They are.
And what you're showing here is clearly client side. It's JavaScript that's being
Yes.
used to set
Yeah.
and retrieve. Is there XBasic equivalents for
Yes.
us? Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so on the XBasic side of things, there's going to be something here somewhere in the let's look at after dialog validate, and I'll make this bigger since we don't need to look at the debugger.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to remember. So here's where you can set state information. And to read it, it's going to be underbar state here. This is going to be different depending on what you're looking at because there's less consistency on the XBasic side of things for this, which is unfortunate. But here's where you can find some state information.
Hmm.
If you're doing an AJAX callback, just use a JavaScript action real quick to create one of those. Edit action, add a new action, callback. We'll call it callback. And then we'll just create the function prototype briefly. And here you're going to see something similar for state information. Here it's underbar SI.
Oh, okay.
I think. I'm just going to quickly check. So
Well, if you
there's a little
scroll,
bit, it's a little bit, yeah, I think that's what it is, underbar SI, the state information. But, state info is available on both sides and it's going to be passed in the request back and forth
and
as
you
you
don't
want
have
it.
to do anything special like say, oh, I
Mm-mm.
want to publish these variables like you do with session variables, is
No,
it?
no, no, no. With session variables, you have to explicitly publish them, and I would just if you're looking at if you're at the
No.
point where you're thinking about publishing a session variable to make it available on the client,
Hmm. Think
you should
about
just
state
be using
variables.
a state variable at that point.
Wonderful. And then the last type of kind of variable, for a lack of a better term, is an argument. Isn't that right? That you can use that can contain values accessible.
Components, yeah, components can have arguments. You can find those here in properties. They are only available on the server. They are often set when the component is, here they are, arguments.
I
They're often
see.
set when the component is, called into existence, and there are ways to change them.
Right.
But depending on where you're using them, that might not be the
They can't be
right tool for
changed
the
client
job.
side. Is that right?
They cannot be changed on the client. No,
Right. Gotcha.
no.
Which makes them safe in a way because you can't
In a
test
way,
them. Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. Um, Someone said, "Oh, why are they called state variables? I mean, the nomenclature behind it. What is state? What the
It's
state? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
it's tracking state information about your application. So your application is in a current configuration, it's in a state, and the state variable has some information about that state.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Like I'm on page 3 of the wizard could be a
Mm-hmm.
state variable.
Yeah.
Yep. And then someone asked, I brought up arguments, and someone said, can arguments be passed between components?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a thing. So let's assume, let's save this. And I think it's other controls. Let's embed an object. Let's embed text box. When you add this embedded component, you have an option to set up the argument bindings here. And if this had an argument, then we could set that. So let's go
Oh,
add an argument to that real quick.
okay.
Come down to properties and go to arguments. Insert new argument. Let's call it value. Character, set at runtime. Click OK. And we called that value, right? So let's insert the argument here as the default value. Save that. And then we come back here and we edit the argument bindings for this guy. There's value character. We could tell it like it's just a regular value, like here's a value. Okay. And so when we live preview that, when that embedded component is loaded, it's going to show that value of the argument if I didn't create an unexpected error in the component. I have a theory about this. So let's just simplify this to value. There we go. So there it is. That's value. So when that got loaded, its value was that value I put in that
Mhm.
builder. That's one way you can do it. Other ways that components are opened is through Action JavaScript. And in Action JavaScript, there is a place to set the argument bindings there. And at a higher level, wherever your components are being embedded, even in a tabbed UI, there's an option to set those arguments. And that can come from a static text value. It could also be read from a control on the component if it's being embedded from a component, or read from a session variable, a page variable, which is a query parameter that you set in the URL for the page that you're accessing. And then also, I believe cookies. Let me go back in here and check real quick.
Mhm.
Evaluate runtime. It's a new argument. Or cookie variable. Yeah, so it could be read from a cookie as well.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
That looks like it for questions, so that there was one quick licensing question. Someone's saying that they know with the community edition they need to publish to Alpha Cloud,
Yes.
but the community edition developer is free. But what if they've got multiple developers? Do they need to have multiple cloud accounts? The answer is no. Right?
No.
It's always free. So if you have 5 developers or 10 developers, it's free. They can all publish to the same cloud if that's what you want to do.
Yeah, the cloud is just, consider the alpha cloud is just buying a server.
Yeah.
And so you only need one place to publish your app. You can have multiple people on your cloud account who have access to publish applications. So.
And you can have multiple applications on your cloud account, and you can divvy it up all kinds of ways.
Yep.
Let's see what else we've got here. Well, that looks like about it. So if we didn't miss anything, please guides@alphasoftware.com, or if it's a question you think is going to be helpful for other people, we'd love it if you were to post it over at forum.alphasoftware.com. I put the link to that in the chat window. Also in the chat window, you'll see a link to the documentation on, there's one for Alpha Cloud, and you'll see the link to the documentation on using Alpha Shell as well. So there's the video for that. So that's it. So hey, Sarah, thanks very much for presenting today. Thanks everyone who showed up. If you got more questions, you know how to reach us. Until then, take care and stay well. Hope to see you next Wednesday. Bye-bye.